for those two in the back to finally get seated. Good to go. Let's go. Hey guys. Good afternoon. Thank you for coming. What? Okay, Shannon. Jeez. All right, we are excited to have veterans and members of our armed forces here today with us to learn about Veterans Day and the story of each of our guests. We thank them for their service to our country, a service that allows us to enjoy freedoms that we enjoy today. I ask that each and every one of you give each member that is up here speaking your full attention and respect. We will have time for questions after the speaker is done speaking. Please help me by welcoming Mike Fontopoulos of the United States Air Force.
Hello, I got to stay here. Normally I'd move around. I'm a mover arounder speaker, but I can't because there's a camera. And the camera guy won't move around with me and this microphone. See, we need, that'd be hazardous duty pay, military term. Anyway, that's funny. Nobody cares. So I'm your academic coach from Springdale Public Schools, and I taught here at Har-Ber for, gosh, about 10 years. How many of you ever had me for an ACT boot camp? Raise your hand. Look at you. There's a few of you. Cool. Oh, there's one in the very back. How'd you do on that test, sir? Okay, cool. Anyway, I'm tickled pink to be here. Walter Benson asked me to be here. Dr. Greep asked me to be here a few months ago, and I said, you bet. And I thought it was going to be on Thursday. On Veterans Day, it was this morning when I got the text as I was watching, looking. Anyway, I'm glad to be here, and hopefully we can learn a little bit about what I did, and maybe it can help you as you cruise around in your little world of worlds that you go through. How many of y'all, anybody in here thinking of joining the United States military in the future? Raise your hand. One of us. What branch might that be? I haven't decided yet. Okay, cool. Cool. I'm going to let these folks come on in. I would suggest the Air Force because it's the one I was in, but you do you. You do you. There's no wars right now, so you're pretty safe that you're going to probably make it. Always think, too, the more training you got, the more money they're investing in you, so that means less likely you're going to go up to the front line. Have a nice day. I really think, though, the future of the Air Force is going to be nothing more than kids like you sitting playing video games in a room by yourself as you fly or drive drones, dropping stuff on people far away. I think the idea of the fighter pilot's going away. I really do. I really do. I don't think we're getting rid of the plane. I just don't think we're putting fighter pilots in harm's way. I think it might be an actual elite group. I just don't see that anymore. It's a lot easier to just operate a robot and move that robot to wherever it needs to go, as opposed to put people in harm's way. But I mean, that's that. That's just my 2 cents. I think that's around the corner. But anyway, okay, enough of that. So we're all here. We're all settled in. So I'm Mike Fontopoulos. I'm from Fort Smith, Arkansas originally. I can't really talk about being in the Air Force without speaking about how or why I got into the Air Force or why I joined the military. So I was 5 years old in Houston, Texas with my brother and my mom when my dad died from a terrible electrical accident. My mom and my brother and me moved back home to her home, which was the River Valley, Fort Smith, Van Buren, Arkansas. And a couple of years later, she remarried. And at first, that was a pretty good idea. I got 3 sisters out of that deal. And then as time went on, as I turned into 13, 14 years old, that became more and more abusive, physically, financially. It became my own little boot camp, quite frankly, for me and my brother. My brother left the house way premature than he should have. And by the time I was 16, going into my senior year, I wanted out. And as a matter of fact, I got out. I had to leave because it was just becoming too physically violent at that house to stay there anymore. So I moved in with a great friend of mine, another football buddy of mine from Southside High School there. And his dad and mom said, yeah, you could stay with us. We got a room here. We got, blah, blah, blah. And so as my senior year wore on, football season came to an end, and I got some scholarship offers here and there. Dr. Tate pulled me aside, and this is kind of one of the moments that I really like to stay at and labor on for just a moment. It's kind of one of my more proud moments, because so many times people get in front of us, somebody that we care about, somebody that we know, somebody that's smart, somebody that we trust, somebody that we care about, love. They get in front of us and they give us a little bit of advice. And so many times young people waste their youngness on being so young, and they don't listen to that great advice. But at this moment I did. And it's kind of, I'm proud of it because it really helped me. And he said, Mike, he goes, I'm going to tell you, he said, you got some scholarship offers, but they're not great, are they? And I said, no, they're not. And he said, you're not a great student, are you? And I said, well, not the best. And he goes, are you ready to go to Oklahoma State University and get in debt? Are you ready to go to Northeastern State University in Tahlequah and get in debt? Are you ready to go to Arkansas Tech and get in debt? And I'm like, no, because that's where I was headed. Go play football and get in debt. And he goes, I think you ought to join the military. And I said, okay. And the first thing I was going to do was join the Marines, because that's, what you do, right? And so I had a Marine drill instructor, a Marine recruiter, if I can get it right, came to the house, and he got in front of me. I know what you want, son. You want the Marines. And I was like, get away from me, you clown. And I couldn't stand that. I couldn't stand some grown man getting in front of me and telling me how I was going to think. And I was like, you find yourself out in your Toyota Corolla and get back to your recruiting station. And not that I have that thought about the Marines. That guy was a clown. And so I didn't join the Marines that day. And he told me, he said, Mike, I think you're probably more suited for the Air Force. And I said, okay, whatever. So I joined the Air Force, of all things. I didn't know anything from anything. I didn't know Marines from Air Force, from Navy. I didn't know what a captain was. I didn't know what a sergeant was. I didn't know what any of that stuff meant. I didn't know there was Air Force bases on planet Earth. I didn't know that stuff. I didn't know we were in the Cold War until you join the Air Force and you're in the Cold War. And you're like, wow, we're in the Cold War. Huh, how about that? So anyway, I joined the Air Force as green as grass. June 22nd, 1987, I was barely 18 years old. We went to Florida for a senior trip, and I was high on the vapors of, what was her name? Julie Hood. I met from Tuscaloosa, Alabama. And I took that to boot camp. Rode her a couple of times. We went away. Whatever. Anyway. So anyway, I'm in boot camp. And I'd already had my boot camp as a childhood. And so boot camp wasn't that hard for me at all. I got out of the boot camp and we went into this thing called the Law Enforcement Academy, because that's what I was going to become. I was going to become a policeman in the Air Force. And so I did. There's two kinds of policemen in the Air Force. There's the law enforcement policemen. Those are the guys that pull you over on base. Those are the guys that break up a fight at the NCO club. Those are the guys that investigate a theft or a suicide or something like that. And then you got security police, which are the guys that make sure you don't, steal an airplane or something like that. There's security and there's law enforcement. I was law enforcement. So I got to work with and train with a bunch of Marines in the Law Enforcement Academy, because Marines don't have their own law enforcement academy. They use the one at the United States Air Force in Lackland Air Force Base in San Antonio, Texas. So I had United States Marine Corps instructors in my face, along with Air Force instructors in my face, with Marines running and Air Force airmen running, and it was way cool. It's kind of a blend, and I've got a picture of us all there in Echo Flight, 1987, October. It was awesome, and it's it's a cherished moment for me. But I bring that up because it was just, again, Mike's learning. That's what I'm talking about. I'm learning that who are all these different military branches and what do they do? And now we're working together, and then I'm in England. Next thing I know, I'm stationed in England. I'm stationed about 50 miles west of London in a place called Royal Air Force Base, Greenham Common. Who'd have thunk it? And so on that base, we were a ground-launched cruise missile base, which is called Glickham. And we had about 81 nuclear warheads pointed towards South China. And at any time, anybody that could, of authority, could go into that certain room, flip some switches, turn a key, and South China would be missing the next day. And we would have what we would call on our hands a nuclear war. This is what we would define as the Cold War. And so it was the responsibility of our Air Force Base to get those nuclear weapons kind of in practice up and ready in less than 30 minutes. We would call those 30 and 30. 30 men moving in 30 minutes, and that is to say 30 ground launch cruise missiles up and rolling. Anyway, we did that a lot. I played football on the base. Who thought that was going to be a part of what we could do? But all of us men on that Air Force Base that had football experience could play. And there was many of us that had college experience. And so we had a good football team. We would play other Air Force bases within England. And then, if you can imagine, set that aside, like over here is the neighborhood pub. We would call that the Buffalo Wild Wings. Okay, imagine Buffalo Wild Wings having its own football team. That they would do that in England. In England, on all these in these British neighborhoods is a pub, and it's been there since the beginning of time. And these pubs had their own dart teams, their own lawn bowling teams, and in some cases their own American football teams. And so we could play American football. You were allowed 5 Americans on that team. So I played on that bunch too. So I played like 4 seasons of football in like 2 years. Had a ball, became an armorer, and what that means is somebody who stands at a window and issues weapons at the beginning of a shift, and then you take the weapons back from the men and women that are coming off the shift. And so you're just constantly counting bullets, touching weapons, and we're talking all small armaments. We're not talking about cannonry or anything like that. The biggest one we would have is a 50 cal, all the way down to maybe a 38 special, some sawed-off shotguns, a lot of M16s, of course, breakdown M16s, what we call GAU M16s. And I got proficient in many of those and expert in a few of those. And this is coming from a kid who maybe had a cap gun when he was a kid. So again, just learning, putting myself out there and learning all these new things. I found out real quick that I like to drive, because we had a sister base. We had RAF Royal Air Force Base, Welford, about another 30 miles west of us. And it's just nothing but a big bomb dump. And so we would have to go police it as well. And so you'd have to take military men and women out there. I chose to do that because I thought, well, this is cool, because I don't have to do some of the other things because I'm driving. I'll drive. So now I'm driving a big school bus that's painted green, if you will. The steering wheel's on the wrong side of the school bus because it's in England, and you're driving on the wrong side of the road because it's England, and you're about 18 years old. Have a nice day. This is way cool. And you're doing it on roads that used to be like goat paths and sheep paths, and that the British authorities would put tar on and call that the M3. And I go drive on that. And so you're like, I only had one accident my whole 2 years over there at one little roundabout. And the little British woman came out there, I told you, bloody Americans, you drive too fast. And I'm like, I'm sorry. Anyway, it wasn't that bad of an accident, but she was mad that day. Anyway, so we got to do that. We're driving everywhere, wrong side of the road. Then I got to get involved in just like travel throughout Europe. Me and some buddies would just take off and get on a van and take the hovercraft across the English Channel, and we'd wind up in Bayeux, France, and then go into Luxembourg, and then go on down into Switzerland, go to Italy, come back up, go through Austria, Germany, go to Belgium. I mean, all these places. We did that a couple of times while I was over there. Way cool. And I think there's something to be said here. I just kept injecting myself into everything. Because for such a long time as a kid, all I could do was just kind of huddle up in my room with my brother and kind of escape that weirdo that was out in the living room that was waiting to beat people up, called my mom's husband. And now I was able to kind of live. And boy, did I want to. And the Air Force gave me that opportunity. And then the end of my career is coming up, and I'm coming to this place called Georgia. And Georgia is where you think it is. It's a southern state down there. And I went to this place called Lowndes County, Georgia, in Valdosta, Georgia, in Moody Air Force Base, which has about 85 F-16s. About half of them every day would load up and take off and fly to Canada. And it was awesome. They'd wake you up about every morning around 6 o'clock. I did that for a little bit, and while we were there, our first sergeant asked us, who wants to go volunteer to Panama? And I said, I want to go to Panama. You don't get that chance very often. Let's go to Panama, eat lobster, have a drink, meet exciting people. And we get down there, and about 3 days into that, we start looking for Manuel Noriega, and it turns into Operation Just Cause because we decided it was time to remove him as leader and dictator of the Panamanians, and there's too many shenanigans going on there. We spend the next 4 or 5 days in downtown Balboa City. We go into Panama City. We're looking for bad guys in the jungle and in urban areas, and then we make our way over to the airport. They asked us to join them at the airport. Next thing I know, we're getting shot at for a living down there at the Omar Torrijos International Airport. We're looking for bad guys there. We're looking for people that may be trying to leave the nation that are bad guys, get them. We're opening up the airport, hopefully inciting people that may want to come into Panama and capture those bad guys. And we did. James Bond kind of stuff. I'm talking about dudes in disguise with beards and fake hair and things of this nature. It was weird, wild stuff. I got to work with the United States Marshals. I got to work with the United States Secret Service. I got to work with the 101st Airborne. I got to work with Navy SEALs that I didn't know were Navy SEALs because that's the way Navy SEALs work. You don't know you're working with Navy SEALs. They're just contractors. And the next thing you know, a year later, that was a Navy SEAL. That was a Navy SEAL. I didn't know that. Yeah, I didn't know that either. Anyway, it was just way cool. And all because I listened to Dr. Tate. Mike, I think you ought to join the Air Force. He was right. A little bit later, I'm at the University of Arkansas. Regretting it. I wish I'd have stayed in the Air Force, said Mike, at that time. Because I was doing so good. I was making rank, cashing checks, kissing pretty girls. I was living the dream. I'm teasing. I wasn't kissing pretty girls, I don't think. Maybe I was. I don't know. Anyway, you get my point. But I'm at the University of Arkansas, and I got this kid sitting next to me in freshman English, and he's got a sucker stuck in his hair. He's about 17 years old. Hey, man, you live off campus? Man, get away from me. And it just made me start thinking about, did I make the right decision? Coming to college, was that the right thing to do? And of course it was. But none of that would have been available to me had I not stopped what I was doing and looked at myself the way I did when Dr. Tate got in front of me and gave me some great advice. And I took that advice. And I applied that advice. Here comes GI Bills to help me to go through college now, debt-free, right? You can't make this stuff up. I was going to college, working at UPS, getting a GI Bill, married to my wife, LaDonna, who became a school teacher at Westwood Elementary School, making her starting salary as a teacher, and I was making more money as a full-time student than she was as a full-time employee of the Springdale Public School District. Now go get you some of that. How does that happen? Because you set yourself up because of the GI Bill and the United States Air Force. And then my grandmother, when I got out of the Air Force, Mikey, you can come down here to Van Buren and get these. I had a stack of checks that I'd forgotten about that were U.S. savings bonds that they had been taking out of my paycheck those many months in the Air Force. And I had about $6,000 in U.S. savings bonds. This is coming from a person who lived in poverty his whole life. My mom's husband was more apt to come to me and my brother for money than he was to make money on his own. Are you with me? All because I listened to somebody. All because I said, I'm going to listen to this guy. And in there, guys, is another lesson. Just going to work every day. Put a smile on your face, going to work, happy to be there. I don't know, what are you working for? I don't know. Why am I working these math problems? I don't know. Why am I doing this English? Why am I doing this reading? You know why? Because one day it's going to make you better. That's why. One day you're going to see the rewards of this. It's like living the life of a farmer. What you're doing today may not have a reward, but it's going to in the future. And that's the way we need to live. That's what the Air Force taught me. That's what that whole thing was. And a little bit of that is what we call faith. Is having faith in what you're doing. Does that make sense? So anyway, that's what the Air Force meant to me. Whenever I get the chance to come do a Veterans Day, that's kind of what I want to talk about, is listening to somebody and kind of living a life that's based around maybe not so much right now, but things are going to come a little bit later. I'm going to have fun right now. Maybe you saw a little bit of that in my story, but the big payoffs, they come later, and that's cool. And by the way, what payoffs, right? I've been married for 28 years. I got 2 great kids. I got a Lord that loves me. I got a home. I mean, are you kidding me? All this from a kid from Fort Smith, Arkansas, who was basically homeless at the age of 16. How about that? How about that? Anyway, that's enough of that. Who's got a question for me? You've been listening to this and you had a question and you're wanting to raise your hand and shoot it. Let's do it. Let's go. Ready, set, go. Anybody? Yes, sir?
What was the most interesting thing you had to deal with when you were like military police?
Interesting thing. I worked a suicide case. That was weird. That was really weird. And the guy used the wrong kind of shot. He used it was a 410 bird shot, and he took the top of his head off with that. And he'd left that for his kids and his wife to walk into later on. And he was struggling with, I think if I'm not mistaken, according to the note that he left on the mirror, he had left a note about sexual identity issues that he was going through. Yeah. And then you had to go in there, and the kids were walking through it. You had to get them out of it, and it was just a mess. That was a mess. Yeah. Yeah. You're still a cop, so you see some stuff you're not supposed to see on planet Earth. Yeah. Anything else? Anybody? Well, y'all are awesome. Let's make room for our next speaker. Yeah.
Please join me in welcoming Sergeant First Class Carol Thompson to Har-Ber.
I know y'all are probably wondering, what's that grandma doing here? It's hard to believe that I was in the military. My name's Carol Thompson, and I joined right after high school. I joined the Army in 1974, which is a long, long time ago. Thing is, when I was in a senior in high school, they'd come to our school and they would give us the ASVAB. And I don't know if that's still an ongoing thing or if you have to now go to a recruiter and ask to take it. But when I did that, they got a hold of us at school and they'd say, hey, you did really well. Shows you have an aptitude for machines, or it tells you what you've got a really good aptitude for. You don't have to go in the military, but it'll tell you what you maybe should look at, what would be your strength as far as what job you'd like to do. But because of my scores, all the military, like Air Force was calling me, Army was calling, and things like that. Well, I wanted to go in the Air Force. So I said, okay, I'm going to go in the Air Force, and I started talking to the Air Force recruiter and would go in and even hang out sometimes just to go and just hear about, what would be your duties and stuff. The thing is, in the 70s, there wasn't a lot of opportunities for females in the Air Force. So I was waiting, and the summer went by. I graduated from high school, waited, and I kept calling them and saying, when am I going to get to go? When am I going to get to go? And they said, we just don't have a slot. We don't have a slot. So then all of a sudden one day, the Air Force, the Army calls me and they say, hey, we can get you in tomorrow. This was like on a Saturday, and they said Monday morning we'll have you on the bus going down to New Orleans, where I'm from Louisiana originally. So they said we all went through New Orleans MEP station. That was the Military Entrance Processing Center. And so they were like, we can get you going. You'll be, out of here in no time. Well, about that time, I had some time. I kept thinking, well, if I can't get in the military, if I can't get in the Air Force, then maybe I'll try to get a job. So I had applied a couple of jobs. I used to take every business class there was in high school. I had a very keen aptitude for business. Back in those days, we took shorthand, we had typing. I did any kind of business machine they had. Computers had not really come into the scene yet, so I didn't get any computer classes, but I took accounting classes and things like that. So I thought, well, I'm gonna get a job. So I applied for a couple of jobs, and everyone, when I would go in for the interview, they'd see I was a kid, and they'd say, hey, you don't have any experience. So I finally said, okay, if I can't get any experience, then I need to do something. So that's when the Army called me, and I said, okay, I'm gone. And I got on the bus, and I went down to New Orleans. They did our physicals and everything. And while I was there, I was sitting out in the waiting room type thing. There was hundreds of us, and they come out and they said, hey, they called me and they said, we need to talk to you. We need to tell you something. So they took me in a back room and they said, you know, your scores are high enough that we want you for the Army Security Agency. And I'm like, what is that? It had not been in existence that long, but it was basically learning how to be a spy. We actually learned, we were doing a job that it was still during the Cold War, like Mike said earlier, and that was a time when, you know, we still had it was the United States and Britain against the Eastern Bloc countries, which were the Russians and that type of stuff. Back then, and the Cold War really gets their name kind of, because we never really had combat. We were like still, my weapons are big, your weapons are big. If I don't shoot mine, you don't shoot yours. It was like a standoff in some ways. We still had skirmishes and things like that. But I kind of got off of that. But anyway, I went and I signed up for that. And while I was doing that, they said, okay, well, you're going to be a cryptologic teletype intercept operator. Had no idea, didn't know what, all I know is they said it was non-Morse. So I thought, okay, that's good. I don't really want to learn Morse code because I thought there's no way I'm going to ever figure that out. Yes, ma'am. Okay. Carmi Shavara Dominguez, return to Mrs. Lowe or Miss Wolf. I think this is for you. Is there some, okay. So I went in and like I said, I signed up for this job and I took it because it said non-Morse code. So I said, okay, good, I don't have to learn Morse code. I'll go into that job. And then I also told them why, I have no idea, but I said, I want to go to Germany. I want you to guarantee me that I get to go to Germany. I had never been out of the country. I lived in Louisiana all my life, and I might have gone to Texas for vacations because we used to go to Astroworld for vacation. But other than that, I had never really traveled that much. So I ended up going, and they said, sure, we're going to guarantee Germany. So like I said, this was August of 1974, so I went to basic training at Fort Jackson, South Carolina, and I spent basic was like 6 to 8 weeks. It depended on how fast they filled up the units, the companies. Because like some of you'd get there, but if we didn't have the 300 people in that unit, you had to wait till the country sent them. So I was in Fort Jackson, South Carolina, finished there October, and then I moved up to Fort Devens, Massachusetts. And that's where I learned how to do my job. The first thing they did was they sent us to Morse code school. I had to learn Morse code, 14 weeks of da-da-da-da-da-da-da. I mean, you listened to it 6 hours a day, and you learned it. You typed it, you wrote it, you dreamed it. I would go to bed at night and I'd go da-da-A, da-da-da-B, da-da-da-da-C in my head, so I learned Morse code. And the main reason we had to learn Morse code is when we started intercepting radio signals. The Russians were smart enough that they had dual channel signals. And I can talk to you about this now because it's all declassified. So you're all okay, you're not gonna get, called by the CIA or anything. And so anyway, they would, we had to know, because then the Russians would get in that other channel. The radio signals would be going this way, but the other channel, they would send Morse code. And what they would do is we would play what we call chase. They would be sending another signal of another frequency. They'd say, okay, move, because they figured out that we were copying them. We were recording their information that they were sending. So they try to jump frequencies, and they would do it all over the place. And your job, we had like a bay of these R390s. These were old receivers, and you would run around and you would chase them. And so I'd spend an 8-hour shift chasing some signals around all over. And what we were doing is these were units that were behind them in the Eastern Bloc, and they were actually exercised. They were not really doing anything, but we were waiting and watching to make sure that they never decided to. They were carrying nuclear weapons. They had rockets pointing at us. We had stuff pointing at them, at China and all these other places. So it was just a constant, it was surveillance. We were surveillancing them, they're surveillancing us. So we went back and forth. So that was a really interesting job. The only problem is you never knew what day it was. We worked 6 days, you were off 2, 6 evening shifts, off 2 days, and then 6 midnight shifts, off 3 days. So I never knew if it was a holiday or anything like that. But you became really good friends with all the people you worked with. I met my husband there. I married him probably about 7 months after I met him. And we were both on the same shifts, and we both worked. He was a Morse code operator, though, so he copied Morse for his living. And I was like, no, I don't want to do that. And anyway, but we've been married now for 46 years. You may have had him as a substitute. He's here. He's decided he missed being in school. We were both school teachers after we got out. And so anyway, he's now substituting for you guys. His name is Mr. Thompson, so I don't know if you've had him in a class. But we got out of the Army in 1977. But what we did is we stayed in what we call the Army Reserves. And the Army Reserves gives you you stay with your military units and stuff. And I learned how to be a finance because I went into college and I studied accounting. So it directly translated into becoming a finance person. So I stayed with the Army Reserves for 19 more years. So I did the military for a total of 22 years. I got to go to all kinds of places. I've been to Egypt. I've gone to Germany several times on deployments. And then all over the United States. We would go to Arizona, Maryland, and just anywhere that the military needed some type of support. That's what the reserves do. My husband, on the other hand, he went through ROTC. When you get into college, you can go into that also. And he became an officer, and he went back on active duty. So I used to have to just travel around with him and find a reserve unit. But I did that, so I enjoyed that kind of stuff. For the job I had, though, we had to have a top secret special intelligence clearance. And that means then when I went in, they had to send people to my neighborhoods. And they asked my mom, they didn't talk to my parents. They talked to all the people that maybe knew me. So it was like, they'd ask, well, what kind of person is she? Did she party a lot? Did she do this? Did she do that? They were trying to figure out what type of character I had in order to get a clearance. You can't get a clearance if you have like things in your past that you can't answer for as far as that goes. So apparently my neighbors didn't have a real bad opinion of me. I got my clearance, and I was able to keep that clearance for the whole time I was in the military. So that was a good thing. We go back to Germany now. I love Germany. Germany is like my home in some ways because we had such a good time there. The German people were nice to us. We would go out and we explored everywhere. We had a car. We drove everywhere. it's a great experience if you ever get a chance. And I would have never gotten that chance if I hadn't joined the military. When I got out of the Army active duty, I went to college on the GI Bill like all the others that have spoke. You know, we use that money. It comes in, it pays your college for you. I had no debt when I got out of the college. Had a degree and no debt. So it's really nice as far as that goes. I don't know, let's see. When I retired, I was a sergeant first class. I never did go in and become an officer. I could have, I had an opportunity, but I had children also, so I just could not swing all of the training I would have had to do to get to become the officer. So I opted to go ahead and stay as a sergeant. I already told y'all that. While we were in, I was still in during the Vietnam era, they call it. The Vietnam War was just closing down in 1974-75. And July of 1975 is the official end of that, of the Vietnam era. So as far as I go, I have that, to look at. I grew up, I think the thing that used to bother me the most is when I was growing up and I was in high school, we used to have the draft would be on TV. They would have a lottery and they would draw draft numbers for the guys. And as a female, I used to feel so sad in some ways because the guys had to register for the draft and they didn't have a chance, if they pulled your number. And that was every night on TV. They would pull so many numbers. And then these guys had to go to the military and they got sent to Vietnam. When they came back from Vietnam, they were not appreciated. They were not honored. They were looked upon like they had done something horrible. And they had to go through a lot of bad stuff in Vietnam. But it wasn't their choice. They were doing what they felt. They served their country. They followed what they were told to do. And so I'm so glad now. We seem to have finally gotten past all of that. We've learned to appreciate our veterans and honor them. And you should always, if you meet a veteran, somewhere else, they wear hats now a lot. I've noticed that everybody has a veteran's hat now. If you were in the military, at least now they're proud and they're showing that they are a member of the military. Thank them. Say hi to them. You don't have to do anything real, out of the world, but you just, let them know that you appreciate them also. I'm very proud. I was always patriotic. I love my country, and I am so glad I went this path. So anyway, that should be enough. I'll sit here and talk forever. And if anybody has any questions, I don't know. Yes.
Do you still know Morse code?
I know it very minimal. My husband knows it a whole lot better. When it comes on TV, when they have like TV shows, sometimes they actually send sometimes Morse code. He can still copy it. But for me, I only had to learn up to 14 words per minute. So, and that was so we could actually do it by pencil. He actually sat at one of they call it mills, but they were old manual typewriters. And he would copy. He can copy probably 50 words a minute. So yeah, it's a whole different story. So yeah. Okay, thank you.
All right, we have 3 minutes till the bell rings. All right, we have 3 minutes till the bell rings. So if anyone has questions they would like to ask, stick around for those minutes and ask. But teachers, if you would like, you can start taking your students back up to class and get ready for the next period. Thank you.